Welcome, everyone. I'm Megan Mermaid, and I'm so excited to talk today all about Mercury retrograde in Aries. Now, this transit is happening from April 1st through April 25th. Now, this Mercury retrograde in Aries is going to have a lot of fire, and we also have a huge solar eclipse in the sign of Aries, conjunct Chiron, happening right smack dab in the middle of this retrograde. So today we're going to talk all about how you can make the most of this portal of time, how to expand and heal this energy of Aries in your life, and how to be of service to the whole while doing so. So first, let's talk about what Mercury retrograde is, why it's important, and why we're here today to dive deeper into this topic. So Mercury retrograde happens 3 to 4 times a year, and it is when it goes back in the direction that it's already been, which means essentially we're revisiting the past. We're going over patterns, situations, beliefs, whatever we need to review before we move on to the next chapter. So with Mercury being in Aries, we are addressing all things Aries related. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and it's all about the self. It's all about pioneering your own path. But what we need to remember about the energy of Aries is it has this shadow side of impulsivity, of narcissism, even, of acting from a place of ego. And also, it has this sort of explosive energy. So when you combine this with the energy of Chiron and this really powerful solar eclipse, we have the power to heal the past, and we have the power to break free from some of these egoic patterns that have been playing out, not only in our lives, but in the lives of the collective. So I'm going to talk about a few key points to really remember in this time. And then we're going to dive deeper into the message I received for what to contemplate on. So Mercury first went into the shadow period, the pre-shadow period on March 19th, which was also spring equinox. So there's so many powerful synchronistic dates that are occurring together. When March 19th took place, that was when you may have started to see patterns or situations that took place that will sort of be revisited once when Mercury goes retrograde, and then once again when it goes into the shadow period. So then we have Mercury in retrograde from April 1st through April 25th. And just a few key points to remember during a retrograde. It's not the time to start something new. It's about revisiting what has already come, tying up those loose ends. So it's not necessarily the time to find a job. Hi, Isis. Or a new place to live or sign contracts. You want to be careful about technology, communication. There might be all sorts of things that get glitchy because Mercury retrograde is a time when Mercury is actually closest to the Earth. It seems like it's further away, but it's actually closer. So then we have this post-retrograde period from April 26th through May 13th. And this is when we are going to kind of come to that completion. Whatever events have occurred, whatever events were revisited, there's some sort of pearl. There's some sort of experience of wisdom that you will gain. And it's sort of like we'll be connecting the dots. So a couple dates that you want to remember. Not only is the really powerful solar eclipse happening on April 8th, and I'll be doing a video devoted just to that, so stay tuned for details. There's also a really powerful cazimi that's happening with Mercury on April 11th. So after we get this huge surge of energy and upgrades on April 8th, there's this like aha flash of insight that's happening on April 11th. But we're not going to see how the solar eclipse is lighting up our self, right? Because solar eclipses have to do with the self, really until we get into May, after this post-shadow period. So we're doing a lot of inner work, a lot of prep. And it's interesting because I live here in Phoenix, Arizona, and this is my first full year since October that I've been living here consistently. And so what other people have told me is that usually by Easter and by spring, it's like almost 100 degrees and it's been cold and rainy. And it kind of reminded me of this energy of retrograde, where it's like we're anticipating this spring, this time of rebirth, but we're in this period of cold in our lives. We're in this period of having to be withdrawn, having to go within, having to carve out the space for that rebirth. So it's sort of like a prolonged rebirth, right? It's almost like that caterpillar is staying a little bit longer in the cocoon, but through that, or you can think of a baby when it's quote unquote late. It's like getting those last nutrients, those last upgrades, those last moments of development before something even bigger, even more powerful, even more amazing can break through. So that's what the universe is giving us, this moment of preparation, this moment of rest before we fully bloom and blossom into this era of spring within our lives. Now, March 20th, April 15th, and May 7th is all when Mercury and Chiron are going to be connecting. Think about what was happening around March 20th and notice if anything similar comes through around these two additional times, because there's sort of like this cycle of healing, this 3-part mini series that's taking place to bring up what's still keeping us in a space of suffering so that we can move forward. Mercury begins its retrograde in 26 degrees of Aries, and it goes all the way through 15 degrees of Aries and then back. So if you have a cardinal sign in your sun, moon, or rising sign, which is Aries, Libra, Cancer, and Capricorn, especially between these degrees of 15 to 26 degrees of Aries, you're probably going to feel it even more powerfully in your life. If you want to know in more detail how this particular retrograde season is going to affect you, you can book your personal astrology session, either a Zoom live reading together or a pre-recorded audio reading, which all of my pre-recorded readings are $20 off through April 8th, which is the solar eclipse. Go ahead and do that. And we can dive deeper into the houses and particular information that may be prevalent to you. I didn't want to focus too much on the astrological dates today or the how it's going to affect your sign or anything like that. There are so many amazing astrologers that are giving you that information. So I encourage you to do your due diligence and find the ones that speak to you. In this particular transmission, I wanted to highlight the contemplative question that will guide your journey through this season. So as I was sort of cleaning up today, I just got home from a visit to my family in California. My grandma just passed. It was her funeral, and all of these very interesting events took place. And so I was just recovering, trying to clean the house. So as I was cleaning my house, I was listening to this podcast called The Future of Making Money. And Emilio Ortiz is interviewing Richard Rudd, who is the creator of the Gene Keys. And Richard Rudd said some really powerful things. I don't want to share everything because I really encourage you to listen to this talk yourself. So I'm going to link it below. But one of the things that stood out was when he was talking about the pearl sequence, which is how we create prosperity. And he posed the question, how can I be of greatest service to the whole? So as long as we're asking that question every day, asking what steps we can take to be of greatest service to the whole, we're going to stay in that flow of prosperity. So let's go a step further and really make this specific to this Mercury retrograde. With Aries being that sign where we pave our own path, where we find our own way, I want you to contemplate on how can you be of greatest service to the whole while following your own path of destiny. Sit with that question. Just let it kind of marinate in your mind as you go throughout the day, marinate and vibrate in your very being. How can you be of greatest service to the whole while following your own path of destiny? So when we think about retrogrades, we're going backwards in a sign. So what's kind of helpful is if you want to move backwards in the energy of a sign, look at its complement, look at its opposite. Highlights of Libra, which is the polarity of Aries, are also going to be coming up. So not only are we paving our own path, but we're also having to look at where we're breaking free from codependent patterns, while also bringing in people, bringing in community. And so often I've heard astrologers say, oh, people from your past are going to come back and avoid it at all costs and it won't last. But I encourage you to see things from a different perspective. If people or situations are coming back into your life during this time, there's a reason. So it's up to you to put on that detective hat and get curious about the lesson, the pearl that that person or situation is teaching you. So, for example, if someone from your past is returning, ask yourself, am I falling back into an old pattern? I had an old friend, kind of a karmic partner, reach out to me yesterday. And I was like, oh, here we go. It's that first kind of interaction where I can see how the old me may have navigated this particular conversation or this situation, and how the new me sort of navigated that. And I was able to kind of step back and observe, oh, wow, this is where I would get caught in that pattern. And then the pattern would lead to distraction, which also led to suffering. And so I had to be amicable, of course, friendly, kind, but at the same time, I didn't take the bait. So I encourage you to really get curious and observe what's going on, and ask yourself, how did I relate to this person or situation or experience in the past? And how can I now, being of more wisdom, being of more experience, being of more light, how can I approach this situation now? What needs to be resolved? What needs to be looked at? What needs to be corrected? You know, there was another situation that took place yesterday with my co-parent. And what I could sort of observe and witness was that there was a moment where we got in kind of a minor disagreement, but I started to feel that anger rising up in me, that need to be right, that feeling of, like, I want to blame this other person. And then it took me back to another experience that happened around Eclipse that took place in October. And in that particular situation, it really became chaotic. And there was a lot of repair that needed to be done because of that situation of really both triggering each other. And so in this moment, I had the opportunity to witness, okay, wow, I see this pattern, this time loop coming up again. And here I am at that moment of reaction or responding. I saw what happened when I reacted last time, and it took me on a lot of work, which was neither good nor bad. It was necessary. But do I want to come back to this space and go through that whole thing again until I can get to this moment? Or do I want to break free from this cycle of samsara and choose something else? So in that moment, what I did is I sort of created almost like this hybrid spell incantation prayer where I just gave it up to God. And I just said, may the highest will be done. May God's will be done in this situation. I call in the spirit of grace. I call in love. I call in truth. And I just gave it up. I surrendered it because I knew in that moment, all I wanted to do was react. And sometimes we're going to experience that where we're on the edge of the cliff with our emotions, especially with Aries. It's this explosive energy, right? It's like it screams and it makes a mess. And then the moment is past, kind of like when a child has a tantrum and then they're super sweet after. That's sort of the energy of Aries. It doesn't hold on, but it does create havoc. And so we've got to be responsible with our emotions. We can't blame it on Mercury retrograde. We have to see that this retrograde is a time of mastery. Mastery for our mind, mastery of the relationships and the conversations and the dialogue that occurs between self and other, our unique path of destiny, and our contribution to the collective. So in this particular situation, I surrendered it, I gave it up, and I decided to return non-love with love, which is another really powerful teaching that is shared in the Gene Keys. I was able to turn that entire situation around, and we were attending a family gathering, and it ended up being a very peaceful, very joyful situation. And I saw how in that moment of responding, of surrendering, of pausing, I was able to break free from that cycle of suffering, that pattern where we would get to this place. It was almost like, you know, there would be this period of harmony and peace, and then there would be this trigger, and then the explosion, and then the repair, and then the period of harmony and peace. But in that moment, I was able to shift it, where instead of the period of harmony and then the trigger and then the repair and all of that, it was a pause, the self-healing to get to a space of equanimity and then back to that harmony. So it's like I could skip the suffering. Now, that doesn't mean that we're never going to trigger again. Obviously, we will. But it's every moment that we're breaking out of a pattern that it becomes easier and easier to recognize and notice when these spaces and places are taking place. That's why remembering those periods of March 20th, April 15th, and May 7th are going to be really helpful in kind of deciphering when these patterns and trigger moments or opportunities for healing are taking place. So consider that question. What is your path of destiny? Mercury retrograde is the time where we can revisit our creative projects and our offerings, or things that, maybe you started, but you didn't get a chance to put effort and energy into, or maybe you got distracted by something else, or you were taken away from those things. This is your opportunity to revisit them, to put life into them. And it's also your opportunity to really figure out what pattern or belief do you want to heal around this time? Because Mercury retrograde deals with the mind. You have this portal of healing for anything mind related, which means that having some type of mental self-mastery mindset work is imperative during this time. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody's going to have the same thing. You've got to figure out what is helpful for your particular growth and evolution, but find a path of mastery and mindset work and stick to it, commit to it. That means also having some type of serious spiritual practice during this time so that you can stay grounded. You also want to make sure that you're taking care of you. As I came home from traveling and spending all of this time with family, and also being with all the grief of a loved one that had passed, I felt that energy of Aries pushing me to pick up and get all the things done that I didn't get while I was traveling. And because my daughter was with her dad, I felt almost like compelled to rush into action and take care of all these things while I had this time. Instead, I decided to slow down. Another thing that Richard Rudd mentions in that podcast, which you can find in the link below, is that when we slow down, everything else speeds up. So that Aries energy wants to rush into action, right? But it's almost this impulsive energy of, okay, you're there, but now what? You haven't have a plan, you haven't thought it through. And so oftentimes we have this overwhelming list of things to do, and all it does is drain us because we're trying so hard to get it all done, but we're not present in any task. And when you're not present in a task, then you're not aware of the wisdom and the opportunity in that moment to tune in to ease and grace and flow. So the day ended up very different than what I expected. I took a lot of time cleaning and putting things away. I rested, I paused, I took in a lot of self-care, and I gave myself permission to rest and to go slow. And from that, all of this wisdom came through. When we have the opportunity to slow down, we receive these really powerful moments of insight from our own higher consciousness that wants to be shared, but can only reach us in the quiet, in the stillness. And so it may feel like a little bit of a contradiction, because Mercury retrogrades are a time to slow down, but Aries wants to speed up. So that's where you've got to find that balance of how can you slow down and reprogram what needs to be reprogrammed, heal what needs to be healed, especially with all this Chiron energy, and be aware of the next action step where you can be of greatest service to the whole, while following your own path of destiny. So I'm going to be sharing some cards from my deck, the Mermaid Empowerment Oracle, as well as a card from the Work Your Light deck by Rebecca Campbell. and the tarot deck. So I'm going to be doing a star spread, and this is my deck, the Mermaid Empowerment Oracle deck. I am not only the visionary artist that has brought through all of the channeled images and visuals on this deck, but there's also a 120-page guidebook that accompanies this deck that goes deeper into each of the teachings, includes the mermaid affirmations, shares with you how to create your own card spreads, and kind of gives you some guidelines for integrity when it comes to divination. So if you're interested, you can find that on my website under the deck on the navigation bar at meganmermaid.com. All right, so let's get started with our star spread, which is my sort of signature reading. And if you're interested in your own pre-recorded intuitive card reading or live session, feel free to book that at meganmermaid.com. So the first card that we have is Radiance, and this is the current situation. And the Mermaid Empowerment for Radiance is I bask in the glow of my inner radiance. So this is this moment where we can come back to a space of finding our own inner light. When we first had the start of our eclipses back in October up through now, I was contemplating on some of the lessons and the growth edges that I was working through. It was funny because immediately after that, I got the download that I was going to let all of my silver hair come in naturally and stop dyeing my hair. So I've gone through a lot of issues in the past few months of self-worth, not feeling attractive, not wanting to put myself out there, all of this inner dialogue and talk that I've had to really be present to and heal from. I've noticed that in the past few months, I've been hiding out more. And so it makes sense that this card Radiance is coming through, because in this solar eclipse and this Mercury retrograde in Aries, we have the opportunity to come back to that light of self, to see our own unique radiance, our own beauty, our own brilliance. And from that, we can then feel that powerful confidence that allows us to attract careers or partnerships or whatever it is that we want without thinking that that thing is going to fulfill us. Then we have for the advice card Focus. I focus only on what I want to create is the Mermaid Empowerment. So that means that we have to focus on our radiance. We have to focus on what lights us up. We have to focus on what we love doing most. And then we've got to get curious about the ways that we keep ourselves from doing that, the ways that we beat ourselves up because we feel like that's not good enough or it's not possible to do those things, whatever it is. We've got to focus our mindset on keeping that inner radiance lit brightly. The challenge card that we have is Crown Yourself. And the Mermaid Empowerment is I crown myself as the star of my reality. So this is a challenge. I feel like in this retrograde period, we have the opportunity, just as I was sharing, to go through those old patterns of limiting beliefs, or where we're beating ourselves up, or where we're feeling like we're not enough, or we're hiding our light, dimming our light because we feel that unworthiness or that lack of whatever it is that's keeping us from shining brightly. We have the opportunity now to crown ourselves and decide that we're beautiful, we're amazing, we're special exactly as we are. And it's time to come out of hiding so that we can be of service to the whole. It's bigger than us. The correct action is so perfect. Paradise. I create paradise with every thought that I think. So it's very clear we have to focus on our thought work. We have to focus on creating paradise with our thoughts. And rather than berating ourselves or judging ourselves when we do get into a negative or unproductive thought, we have to be mindful of it and shift that and do whatever is necessary to bring that light back in. For confidence, the Mermaid Empowerment is it feels so good to sparkle and shine. So how is this connected to radiance? It feels good to shine our light. When we're shining our light is brighter than the unproductive thoughts. Our light is brighter than our fears. Our light is brighter than the darkness that is keeping humanity in a space of suffering. But how do we get there? How do we crown ourselves and focus on creating a paradise of mind so that we can feel that confidence and that radiance? Just as I had that situation where I wanted to get mad, I was listening to a talk from my pastor at Unity, and he shared this saying that said, when you give someone a piece of your mind, PIECE, then you lose your peace of mind. So it's like we can choose to be right or we can choose to be peaceful. So just like in that moment, I had to surrender that feeling of being right or surrender that need to want to say that the last word or have the upper hand. I surrendered it. And I feel like I was sort of modeling in that moment what we're going to be experiencing, where in order to get to that radiance and confidence, we have to be willing to surrender. We have to surrender the fears. We have to surrender the limiting and outdated beliefs. We have to surrender our need to control. We have to surrender and give it up to that spirit of grace, that spirit of compassion, that spirit of forgiveness, that spirit of God that's guiding us into our true path of destiny so that we can be of greatest service to the whole. I pulled a card from the Work Your Light deck and the tarot to kind of tie all of this together. And we have Take a Break from Work Your Light. It says, a life's work, not a season. Get off the treadmill. So there's going to be a lot of moments where the insight that we receive, the intuitive hit, is actually not to do anything, but to take a break, to pause and to listen, to get back into that space of receiving. And then from that space, we'll know what to do. And from the tarot, we have the Star, which is really beautiful. It's the card after the Tower, after, some type of chaotic experience, after some type of crumbling. The Star is that experience of hope, that moment where there's a glimmer of what's to come, the anticipation of what's to come, the excitement of being able to recognize those patterns that we've played out over and over and over again and find that doorway where we can exit the old programming and create a new experience, a new action that will take us into the next part of the story rather than repeating the past. So in this Mercury retrograde season, we've got to revisit the past so that we won't stay stuck in it anymore. That is all that I have for you today. If you're interested in getting your own personal reading or Gene Keys session, I offer intuitive card readings, astrology readings, galactic channeled readings, and I also offer Gene Key sessions. So you can find all of that at meganmermaid.com. And I'm also going to be sharing more about the 7 Sacred Seals guided journey that we're going on through the Gene Keys curriculum that's happening in May. So stay tuned for details. If you're not already on my mailing list, make sure to add yourself so that you don't miss out on all of the stuff that I share in that newsletter, which is escaping me now, but is obviously important. And finally, let's see. Oh, and if you're like, Megan, why are you always talking about the Gene Keys? I don't even know what that is. I've linked a New to the Gene Keys free mini course that you can go through that is available on the website, as well as the link to find your own hologenetic profile. So that's a great first step when we're in these Mercury retrograde portals. Not only mind work, but also study, especially if you've visited or looked at the information of the Gene Keys before. This is a great time to go back and dive deeper for those pearls of wisdom. So I love you all. I'm wishing you a beautiful Mercury retrograde, and I will see you for our solar eclipse talk that's happening next week on April 8th. Love you all. Have a great day.